The night was hot. Las Vegas was buzzing. September 7th, 1996, Mike Tyson had just demolished Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand. The energy was electric. In the middle of it all was Tupac Shakur. He was on top of the world. He was with Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records. They were more than just artist and label boss. They were a force. After the fight, there was a scuffle in the MGM lobby. A member of Tupac's crew spotted Orlando Bobby Lane Anderson. Anderson was a member of the South Side Compton Crips. A few weeks earlier, he had allegedly snatched a death row chain from one of Tupac's guys. In the world they lived in, that was a profound sign of disrespect. So, Tupac, Suge, and their entourage confronted Anderson. A beatdown ensued. It was caught on the hotel's security cameras. It was quick, brutal, and public. Later that night, Tupac was riding in a black BMW 750i. Suge Knight was driving. Tupac was in the passenger seat. They were heading to Club 662, a spot Suge owned. They were part of a long convoy of cars filled with friends and associates. They stopped at a red light on Flamingo Road near the Maxim Hotel. A white late-model Cadillac pulled up on the passenger side. Someone from inside the Cadillac opened fire. Bullets ripped through the BMW. The glass shattered, metal screamed. Tupac was hit 4 times, in the chest, the arm, the thigh. One bullet tore through his lung. Suge was grazed in the head by a fragment. The Cadillac sped off into the night. The convoy, which had been so imposing moments before, was now a scene of chaos and confusion. Suge, bleeding from his head, managed to make a U-turn and race towards the hospital, but police stopped him. Paramedics arrived. Tupac was rushed to the University Medical Center. He fought for 6 days. On September 13th, 1996, Tupac Shakur died. He was 25 years old. The story seems straightforward. A gang member gets beaten up. He and his crew seek revenge. They find their target and shoot him. This has been the official narrative for decades. The shooter was Orlando Anderson, getting payback for the public humiliation at the MGM. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department believed it. The Los Angeles Police Department believed it. It was the simplest explanation, and for a long time it was the only one that made any real sense. But is that all there was to it? Was it really just one man in a car firing a gun out of a window? Or was there something else going on? The question that lingers, the one that fuels documentaries and books and late-night arguments, is was there a second shooter? To even ask that question, you have to look past the simple story. You have to examine the cracks. The inconsistencies, the things people said and the things they didn't say. The evidence that was found and the evidence that vanished. The official story is clean. The reality of that night was messy, and in that mess the idea of a second shooter was born. It's not just a wild theory, it comes from the testimony of the people who were there, and from the cold, hard logic of ballistics. Let's start with the witnesses. The most important witness was in the car directly behind Tupac and Suge. His name was Yafu Fula. You probably know him as Yaki Kadafi, a member of Tupac's group, the Outlaws. He was Tupac's godbrother. They were family. Kadafi told police that he saw the shooter. He said he could identify him. He saw the man's face. This was a massive break for the police. An eyewitness who could put the killer behind bars. But Kadafi never got the chance to testify. 2 months after Tupac was shot, on November 10th, 1996, Yaki Kadafi was shot and killed in a housing project in New Jersey. He was just 19 years old. His murder was officially chalked up to an argument over money. The man who shot him turned himself in, claiming it was an accident. But the timing was, to say the least, suspicious. The one person who could positively identify the man who shot Tupac was now dead. Was it a coincidence, or was he silenced? If Kadafi was silenced, who was he a threat to? The official story says the shooter was Orlando Anderson. If Kadafi was going to point the finger at Anderson, then Anderson or his associates had a clear motive to kill him. But what if Kadafi saw something different? What if the face he saw wasn't Orlando Anderson? Or what if he saw more than one face? What if he saw more than one gun? We'll never know. His death created a vacuum of information, a black hole right at the center of the investigation. That vacuum has been filled with speculation ever since. Then there's Suge Knight, the driver, the man sitting right next to Tupac. His testimony should be the most crucial of all. But Suge has been a walking contradiction for decades. Immediately after the shooting, he famously told police, "I don't know nothing. I ain't seen nothing." This was the code of the street, no snitching. His silence effectively stalled the investigation from the very beginning. Over the years, his story has twisted and turned. He has hinted that he knows who did it. He has pointed fingers, sometimes at his enemies in Bad Boy Records, sometimes at his own head of security, Reggie Wright Jr. He has claimed that he was the real target, and Tupac just got in the way. What Suge has never provided is a clear, consistent account of what he saw coming from the white Cadillac. Did he see one shooter or two? Did he see one gun or more? His refusal to cooperate created another void. If the driver of the car won't talk, then all you have are the people in the cars behind, the people on the street. And their stories are just as muddled. Members of the Outlaws who were in the convoy gave conflicting statements. Some said they saw a hand with a gun. Others couldn't see anything clearly. It was dark, it was fast, it was terrifying. Human memory is fallible on a good day. In a moment of extreme trauma and violence, it's even less reliable. This is where the physical evidence should clear things up. But it doesn't. It only makes things more confusing. The crime scene was a mess. The Las Vegas police have been heavily criticized for their handling of the case. The scene wasn't properly secured. The convoy of cars, all potential witnesses, were allowed to leave and disperse. The black BMW was examined, but the white Cadillac, the shooter's car, wasn't found for 3 days. By the time it was recovered, it had been wiped clean. No fingerprints, no casings, nothing. So we were left with the bullets. 13 or 14 shots were fired in a matter of seconds. 12 hit the car. 1 grazed Suge. 4 hit Tupac. The question is, could one person, leaning out of a car, fire that many shots so accurately and so quickly with a single handgun? A Glock is a semi-automatic pistol. You have to pull the trigger for every shot. Firing that many rounds in a few seconds is possible, but it takes skill and a steady hand, especially from a moving car at another moving car. Some analysts have looked at the bullet trajectories, the holes in the BMW. They suggest that the shots came from slightly different angles. Some seem to come from a lower position, as if someone was firing from the backseat. Others seem to come from a slightly different horizontal angle. Could this be explained by the cars moving relative to each other? Absolutely. But could it also be explained by 2 shooters in the Cadillac firing at the same time? That's also a possibility. The theory of a second shooter isn't just about 2 guns. It's about what that implies. A single shooter, Orlando Anderson, suggests a crime of passion, an impulsive act of revenge. It's personal. 2 shooters suggests something more. It suggests planning, coordination. It feels less like a simple retaliation and more like a professional hit, or an assassination. And if it was an assassination, then the motive might be much bigger than a scuffle in a hotel lobby. This brings us to the cast of characters. The story has never been just about Tupac and Orlando Anderson. It's a sprawling epic with a huge ensemble. First, you have the South Side Compton Crips, the gang Orlando Anderson belonged to. His uncle, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, was a high-ranking member. For decades, the story was that Keefe D. was driving the white Cadillac. His nephew Orlando was in the backseat on the passenger side. 2 other Crips, DeAndre Freaky Smith and Terrence Bubble Up Brown, were also in the car. In this version, the gun was in Orlando's hand, and his hand only. This narrative was solidified by former lap-dead detective Greg Kading. In his book Murder Rap, Kading laid out a detailed theory based on his interviews with Keefe D. Kading's investigation concluded that Sean Puffy Combs had offered $1 million to the Crips to kill Tupac and Suge Knight. Keefe D. and his crew took the contract. The MGM fight was just the catalyst, the perfect excuse to carry out the hit that night. According to Kading's work, which is based on Keefe D.'s own proffer session with law enforcement, Keefe D. passed the gun to his nephew Orlando, who did all the shooting. This account is the bedrock of the modern single-shooter theory, but Keefe D. is not a simple source of truth. He's a man trying to navigate a dangerous world, talking to police to save his own skin from federal charges in another case. His story is self-serving. He admits to being in the car, he admits to being part of the conspiracy. But he places the gun in the hands of his nephew, Orlando Anderson, who was shot and killed in 1998. A dead man can't contradict you. A dead man can't be prosecuted. It's a very convenient way to tell the story. You get the street cred for being there, for being part of a legendary murder, but you deflect the ultimate responsibility onto someone who can no longer speak. What if Keefe D. was lying about the details? What if he was protecting someone else who was in that car? What if DeAndre Smith or Terrence Brown also had a gun? Or what if Keefe D. himself fired? His story pins everything on one person. It's neat, it's tidy, but reality is rarely so simple. Maybe 2 people were firing to ensure the job got done. If you have $1 million contract on the line, you don't want to leave things to chance. Then there is the larger context of the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry. This was the biggest story in music at the time. Death Row Records, led by Suge Knight with Tupac as its star, was at war with Bad Boy Records, led by Puffy and his star, the notorious B.I.G. The conflict was real, and it was violent. It's impossible to talk about Tupac's murder without acknowledging this. The theory that Bad Boy was involved has been around since day one. It suggests that this wasn't just a Compton Crip issue, it was a bi-coastal conspiracy. If Puffy and Biggie were behind it, as some theories claim, would they have entrusted such a high-stakes hit to a single, hot-headed gang member? Or would they have wanted a more professional operation? A more professional operation might involve more than one shooter. It might even involve a second car. Some theories have floated the idea of a second car being involved. A car that perhaps blocked traffic, or a car that provided a second angle of attack. There is very little concrete evidence for this. No credible witness has ever come forward and said they saw a second car firing shots. But the chaos of the scene makes it hard to rule anything out completely. The focus was on the white Cadillac. If another car was involved, it might have slipped away unnoticed in the immediate aftermath. This leads us to the most outlandish but persistent theories, those that involve police corruption or government conspiracy. The book A Labyrinth by Randall Sullivan, which followed the investigation of lap detective Russell Poole, painted a picture of deep corruption within the Lapton. Poole believed that off-duty Lapton officers who were affiliated with Death Row Records were involved not only in covering up Tupac's murder, but also in the subsequent murder of the notorious B.I.G. In these more complex theories, the murder was not just a gang shooting, it was a multi-layered plot. Suge Knight is often placed at the center of these theories. One version says Suge had Tupac killed because Tupac was planning to leave Death Row and take his valuable master recordings with him. Tupac was worth more to Suge dead than alive. In this scenario, Suge would have arranged the hit. He would have known the white Cadillac was coming. He would have put Tupac in the line of fire. If Suge Knight, a man known for his ruthless efficiency, arranged the hit, would he have relied on a single shooter? Or would he have had a backup plan? A second shooter to guarantee the outcome. The problem with all these theories, from the simple to the complex, is the lack of hard proof. For over 25 years, the case remained cold. Orlando Anderson, the primary suspect, was dead. Yaki Kadafi, the key witness, was dead. Suge Knight wasn't talking, and Keith D was living his life, occasionally giving interviews and bragging about his involvement in a way that always kept him just on the right side of the law. Then, in 2023, everything changed. After years of talking openly in interviews and even writing a book, Compton Street Legend, where he detailed his role in the murder, Dwayne Heath D. Davis was arrested. He was indicted by a grand jury in Nevada and charged with the murder of Tupac Shakur. The charge was murder with a deadly weapon with the intent to promote, further, or assist a criminal gang. The arrest was a bombshell. It was the first time anyone had been formally charged in the killing. The prosecution's case is built almost entirely on Keefe's own words. His public confessions, his interviews, his book. He had talked himself into a murder charge. But what does his arrest mean for the second shooter theory? In a way, it both strengthens and weakens it. The prosecution's narrative, based on Keith D's own story, is that he was the shot caller. He acquired the gun, he was in the car, and he handed the gun to Orlando Anderson, who pulled the trigger. This is the single shooter theory, now being presented in a court of law. For the purposes of a conviction, it doesn't really matter if Orlando was the only shooter. Under Nevada law, if Keith D aided or abetted the murder, he is just as guilty as the person who fired the gun. The prosecution doesn't need to prove there was a second shooter. They just need to prove Keith D was a principal in the crime. So, the legal case will likely focus on the simplest version of the story, the version Keith D himself has told. It's the easiest to prove, it's based on his own confession, there is no need to complicate it with talk of second shooters or second cars. It muddies the waters. But the arrest doesn't erase the old questions. It doesn't fill in the cracks. Why did Keith D suddenly start talking so much? Was he telling the whole truth, or a version of the truth that served him best, until it finally backfired? Does his story, the one he is now being prosecuted for, fully account for the chaos of that night? Does it account for the number of bullets? Does it account for what Yaki Kadafi might have seen? Let's try to construct what it would have looked like with a second shooter. Imagine the white Cadillac pulling alongside the BMW. It's a moment of intense adrenaline. Keith D is in the front passenger seat, as some accounts have placed him. Orlando Anderson is in the back seat behind him. Maybe Terrence Brown is driving, and DeAndre Smith is in the back on the driver's side. The window goes down. In the official story, Orlando leans over and fires. Now imagine a different scenario. The window goes down, Orlando has a gun, and maybe the person next to him, DeAndre Smith, also has a gun. Or maybe Keith D, in the front seat, also has a gun and starts firing. Now you have two weapons, perhaps of the same caliber, to avoid conflicting ballistics, firing in unison. This would explain the sheer number of shots in such a short time. It would explain any potential variations in bullet trajectory. It would increase the odds of hitting the target, Tupac. It turns a frantic act of revenge into a more calculated, overwhelming assault. This isn't just fantasy, it's a plausible scenario in the world of violent crime. Major hits are often carried out by more than one person to ensure success. The idea that 4 Crips, on a mission to avenge a public beating and possibly fulfill a $1 million contract, would rely on a single handgun seems almost less plausible than the idea of a coordinated attack. So where does that leave us? Was there a second shooter in the Tupac murder? The honest answer is that we still don't know for sure, and we may never know. The evidence for a single shooter is strong, and it comes from the mouth of the man now charged with the crime. Keith D's confession is the most powerful piece of evidence the state has, and his confession points to one man, his nephew, Orlando Anderson. This is the story you will hear in court. It is a story that is now, for all intents and purposes, the official record. But the evidence for a second shooter, while circumstantial, is also compelling. It's found in the lingering doubts, the sheer volume of fire, the suspicious death of the only eyewitness who claimed he could identify the killer, the unreliable and self-serving nature of every single key player, from Suge Knight to Keith D. The entire case is built on a foundation of lies, omissions, and street codes. Nothing is as it seems. The arrest of Keith D feels like an ending, a final chapter after almost 30 years of waiting. But it's not. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. A trial will force some of this evidence out into the open, but it will also seek to simplify a very complex story into a binary choice for a jury, guilty or not guilty. The nuances, the lingering questions, the possibility of a second gun might all be lost in the legal process. So ultimately, the search for a second shooter is part of a larger search for a truth that has been deliberately obscured for decades. It was obscured by the code of silence. It was obscured by the death of witnesses and suspects. It was obscured by shoddy police work. And it was obscured by the very people involved, who have told and retold the story to suit their own needs. The story of Tupac's murder is not just about who pulled the trigger. It's about the world that created the trigger man. A world of violence, money, and power. In that world, it is entirely possible that more than one person fired a gun on that hot Las Vegas night. The white Cadillac was filled with men fueled by revenge and greed. The idea that only one of them was armed feels almost too simple, too neat, for a story that has never been anything but messy and complicated. The simplest answer is that Orlando Anderson was the lone shooter. But in the case of Tupac Shakur, the simplest answer has rarely, if ever, been the whole truth. The ghost of a second shooter will likely haunt this case forever, a symbol of all the questions that remain unanswered.